Hi, everyone. Welcome to Inner Glow Sessions. Today, I have a special guest, Harmony. Dr. Harmony Robinson-Stagg is a leading Ayurveda and women's health practitioner, doctor of Chinese medicine and acupuncture, and registered nurse. With over 2 decades of experience, Harmony blends the wisdom of Ayurveda, traditional Chinese medicine, and Western science to help women reclaim their health, balance their hormones, and step into holistic success. She is the founder and lead educator at the Ayurveda Alchemist Academy, where she trains health and wellness professionals in evidence-based Ayurveda through certifications in Ayurveda holistic health coaching, Vedic breathwork, and Ayurvedic body therapies. Harmony is also the creator of the Higher Self Method, a transformational framework that bridges ancient wisdom with modern science for lasting mind-body healing and business growth. In 2025, Harmony adds author to her long list of accolades with the release of her debut book, Ayurveda and the Alchemy of Her, a soul-stirring guide that merges spirituality, psychology, and Ayurvedic medicine to help women rise in their Dharma and live in alignment with their highest self. Thank you for joining us today, Harmony. That all sounds so beautiful.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I'm just going to start by giving the floor to you. Like, tell us about your background and everything that I just talked about. I would love to dig in more. So,
Yeah, absolutely. As you mentioned, I'm an Ayurveda women's health practitioner, doctor of Chinese medicine, and am also a registered nurse. So I've always had a long background in health, but the reason that I transformed through that process, I guess you could say, from being very much in clinical allopathic medicine and science to more Eastern medicine is really through my own journey. And what had happened is I had basically given since I was like I've become a nurse when I was 17.
okay.
No, so I started uni, sorry, from when I was 17, university, which is college for you guys,
Hmm.
to become a nurse. And so my whole adult life, that's all I knew, but it was never my dharma. It was never my passion. It's just I was from a very small country town, and my mum's like, "You're so great at bandaging up your animals, you'd be such a great nurse. You can travel." So I didn't know what else to do. So I was like, okay, I'll go to uni and do nursing. And also, I've always been into health and fitness and wellness.
Okay.
So that's sort of like how I ended up there. And I'm very grateful for that opportunity and that journey because it did teach me a lot about the human body, and it taught me a lot about the system that we, live in the West when it comes to health. What it didn't teach me is actually how to manage and heal myself when I went through a health crisis. And
Mm.
that was a big awakening for me. So I have always been like a bit of a busy bee. So alongside my nursing, I was teaching yoga, I was teaching Pilates, I was teaching boot camps, I was a fitness instructor as well. Had my own activewear label because,
Ooh.
I always had the passion for the health and fitness, not so much the sickness that was
Yeah.
in the hospital system. So I always had these sort of passion projects on the side. And then I fell pregnant with my twin boys, which, was such an exciting time for me because we tried for a little while, finally fell pregnant, found out I was having twins. And then after the birth of my twins, my body changed. I went into a great hormonal imbalance, gut health issues, my mental health declined, a lot of stress and anxiety of being a new mom, but also being like that type A, driven to try to keep my business succeeding, showing
Yeah.
up and doing my best at work in an emergency department, all the things. And the very system that I had given over a decade of my life to, which was the medical system, could only offer me very little in the healing that I actually needed to overcome my issues. And so I'd like to say I turned to Ayurveda, but I turned back to Ayurveda because it had been a part of my life previously. And I'd studied Ayurvedic psychology and, it's the sister science of yoga as well. So I delved into it with my yoga teacher training, all of those things. And I thought, what has always really resonated with me is the Ayurvedic way and the Ayurvedic way of healing. And so I'm going to go down that path and see if it truly can help me now that I really have something going on. And the transformation it gave me was so, like, I couldn't put it into words because it wasn't just my health that transferred, my physical health. It was
Mhm.
my mental health. It was like this awakening to my dharma, my purpose as well. And I was like, what am I doing? Like with my whole, it was just this whole life experience sort of moment where I'm like, really, what is it that you need to do? Because it's not just your physical health, and doing just diet and supplements and all this that creates the change at the cellular level. It's also, managing your dharmic health, which is your purpose, your inner guidance, your soul health, your emotional, your mental health. All of the pieces have to come together for you to really thrive and step into your higher self. And it was through that process that I realized that's what living is.
Yeah, I love that. And I especially resonate to the part where, because I think this is a universal experience. Also, I don't think we mentioned, because you're located in Brisbane, Australia. So there's differences to America, which we'll get to in a minute, but there's like universal things that I think are common because I personally think it's a horrible idea to have 18, 17, 18-year-olds decide what they want to do for the rest of their life. And that's basically what society has designed with college and everything else. And because I was in the same position, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I just kind of picked something and then I did it for a really long time and it wasn't aligned with my purpose. So I definitely resonate with that. But can you explain more about the gap? Because you when you went through your own experience and you found that traditional medicine couldn't help with that, was it like an intuitive knowing, or was there certain things that you could actually point out that, like, no, this isn't doing it for me and I need to search somewhere else?
Yeah, absolutely. There was always that a bit of intuitive knowing, but I did go and use the science and the medical system as, for investigations, which, can be a really good thing because it ruled out anything sinister. So for my gut health, for instance, I saw a gastroenterologist
Mm,
and I did get all the scans. So it ruled out that there was anything sinister going on, like tumors or cancers and all of that. So, I'm grateful that we do have that to offer people. But once those big sort of ticket items are ruled off and you're still suffering with the symptoms, but they're like, well, that's sort of all we can do for you. There's nothing in your blood work. I mean, there was a little bit of hormone dysregulation, yes, in my blood work, but I just had twins and all that. So it was sort
mm,
of recalibrating himself, but nothing that they were going to do anything really about. And the main hormone that was sort of imbalanced, it wasn't actually my estrogen or my progesterone, it was my cortisol. So my cortisol was really high.
yeah,
So there's nothing that they look at, like, is it Addison's, is it thyroid, is it all those things? No, it's not. It's just cortisol, which is our stress hormone. So really the best way to manage that is through lifestyle and herbs and stuff that
yeah.
like I think medicine doesn't give us. And then for my gut health, all of the scans and bloods and everything came back normal. So then I was referred to a dietitian, and a dietitian is in Australia, they're sort of linked with the more of the medical system, and
Okay.
nutritionists a bit more alternate. So this dietitian put me on a low FODMAP diet. So they essentially diagnosed me with IBS, which is irritable bowel syndrome, which is sort
Yeah.
of a diagnosis given to someone who has gut health issues where there's no identifiable cause from the allopathic Western medical lens. So then I was sent to a dietitian, put on a low FODMAP diet, which is what they do with IBS clients. And that dietitian told me to eat white bread and jam, which I didn't eat in my normal diet. And the IBS I had was one that was, I had a lot of constipation issues with that.
Oh,
And so
and they told you to eat
when,
bread.
when I was eating white bread and jam, my symptoms got so much worse, surprisingly. And
Also, yeah,
then
because jam is like basically just sugar, and I thought that's
sugar.
not good for, yeah,
Ex-
but what do I know?
exactly. And so when I went back, I was like, I tried your suggestion. This is not working. Like this is my bloating is worse because I'm more constipated than ever. My
Yeah.
gut more swollen. The sugar's inflammatory for me. And she's like, just trust it. Just trust. We've just got to like rule out little bits by little bits. I'm like, we're not ruling out anything because unfortunately, a lot of fruits and vegetables are high in FODMAPs, which are these
Yeah,
certain
what does
proteins
that
in.
mean, by the way?
So
Like,
FODMAP stands for fermented oleosaccharide, disaccharide, like each, it's an acronym. So
oh, okay.
FOD, yeah. And it's like these chemicals or proteins naturally in
Okay.
foods. Most of them are plant-based foods that can create like a gas exchange in people in
Okay.
like different symptoms. So that's why they were sort of reducing the fruit and vegetables I ate. But then anyway, it went worse. So I was like, this isn't the answer. And this is where that intuitive piece really kicked in. It's like, no, listen to yourself and what you've been saying all along, which has turned back to the Ayurvedic pathway for you. And Ayurveda looks at gut health being one of the most important aspects of your health
Mm.
because it's where your Agni, your digestive fire is. And if we can't digest our foods properly, then we can't use those elements of the foods to go on to nourish every cell and tissue in our body. And also, if our Agni is low, not only is our digestive power in our gut low, but the Agni of our mind, our intellect, all of these transformative processes in the body is also low. So I also started learning more about my individual constitution. And from an Ayurvedic perspective, I'm very Vata, which means that eating cold foods like salads, even though they were really healthy, or cold like bread and jam, is not conducive to my constitution. I need
Mm.
cooked foods. And so when I started following the Ayurvedic guidelines for my individual constitution, everything changed. And yeah, it did start with the physical. It started with less bloating, less gassiness, less lethargy because I was actually processing the foods and it was going on to create energy in the body. And then the brain fog went, and then I could deal with the stress and anxiety, and I could implement what we call Dinacharya, which is daily routine that could nourish myself, help me turn up as a better mother, and just it was just a flow and effect. So that's sort of how I got there. I did go through and did try and test the Western medical side first, and I did want to get the answers through tests and scans and stuff. But once I did and know it wasn't anything like dead serious, then the only thing that could help me was going back to my constitution and supporting it through the Eastern medicine.
So was that a journey you had to find on your own? Because it sounds like in Australia is similar to America. Because in America, if you go to a doctor and don't feel well, as long as your blood work is okay, like they really don't care, and they're not willing to work with you. Because I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's like 5 or 6 years ago. And the medication the doctor put me on, like I still felt like shit. And she was like, well, your blood work's fine, so it's fine. And she wasn't willing to help me more. So I had to like do my own discovery and Google. So what was that process for you? Like, had you already heard of Ayurveda, or was that something like you just learned through researching?
Yeah, so I think we do have, because we're both in like these Western societies where we are mostly governed by the allopathic medical system, right?
Hmm.
However, I do have a lot of clients in the US, and I do think that Australia, for a better word, has a more accepting or better
No,
medical
yeah, you can
system.
say it. Like, I think any American would agree.
Because even myself, as an Ayurvedic practitioner, I will say to my Australian clients, can you go and get this blood work done and bring it back to me? And the doctors are always happy to do like what they can.
Mm.
And a lot of our blood work is government funded. Therefore, the client doesn't have to pay for it. And that's why I say go to
Hmm.
the GP, get this blood work because you don't have to pay for it. Whereas when I have a lot of American clients, they're like, oh, it's a bit tricky to get this and that. And they have a lot of
Hmm.
out-of-pocket expenses. And so, in that respect, we do have more free healthcare and we're not so heavily reliant on health insurances. Although,
Yeah.
yeah. do have that as well. We have, I think, a more opportunity with healthcare. And so it is a little bit different. And just speaking from where I am on the Gold Coast in Australia, um, I mean, it's been a massive journey with trying to bridge the gap, but I'm seeing more acceptance of these quote unquote alternative health modalities, such as acupuncture, Ayurveda, naturopathy. Not always and not everywhere, but I have had referrals from doctors themselves because they're trained in that system where it's, treated either with pharmaceutical medication or surgery
Yeah.
or dietitian. And if that can't be if that doesn't work, or if those things can't address the problem, then people are having to search for their own answers. Or some doctors are open-minded enough to say, hey, why don't you try speaking with a naturopath or an Ayurvedic practitioner, etc.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at. And for me, I had already been exposed to Ayurveda. I've grown up, living in that
Oh,
sort of, my
okay.
parents were very much natural health people. I mean, my name's Harmony. I didn't make that up. My parents gave me the name, So,
But that's so interesting though. So your parents were natural health, but your mom encouraged you to be a nurse.
yeah, I think what mum saw was I was the first person in my whole family to ever have gone to university.
Mm,
And she wanted that for me because she felt like her life, she didn't have any qualifications and she wanted me to be able to travel because that was always a dream of hers. And in her
okay.
mind, she thought, well, nurses, they can get work anywhere. So essentially, you
Yeah.
can go travel anywhere, but it's not that easy. There's like every country's exams and all this to do. She didn't
Oh,
realize
that's
that.
true. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was a bit easier back in the day, but that was sort of her vision for me, give her this ticket to the world. And also, she's always so caring and compassionate about animals, and she loves health. And like I said, we're from a small country town, so we didn't realize what other opportunities were out there in that field. And so she really sort of wanted to set me up with a quote unquote career, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And that just goes along with, again, when you're like 17 or 18, you're just kind of going along with what other people want you to do.
Yeah, totally. And to that point as well, I feel like the reason I stayed in it for so long, because I knew from the get-go it wasn't me, but I
Hmm.
didn't know exactly other than, you know, going into fitness and pursuing more of a career in personal training or something like that. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And again, my dad didn't even finish school and they were the funny thing is my parents were so relaxed with my schooling, with what I did until I got to year 12 and I was almost going to graduate and they're like, "Oh no, you have to go to uni." I was like, "What?" Because so it kind of like
Oh,
was
so it was just
they
like
shoved
thrust on you.
yeah, it wasn't like I was set up for this path by them because they were laid back. They were quite hippie-ish, right? And
Okay.
then all of a sudden they started freaking out. They're like, none of them had graduated, finished school. Dad did get a government job. He was a carer, but he didn't like the job. My mum didn't have, and they wanted a different trajectory for me. And even my dad, who does not care about like so much about education and uni and that. I did say once, well, I just want to be a personal trainer. And he said to me, and it's the only time he's ever said anything like this, he's like, that is a job, not a career. And for you, we want something different. And
Mm,
so I guess that, because my dad had never said anything like that. So that sort
yeah.
of reiterated when my mum's like, no, you have to apply to the universities. And then once I got into nursing and I still didn't love it. I knew it wasn't my Dharma, but when I look back, the path of doing it was because it has taught me so much in the position I'm in now. But also, my grandma, who I absolutely adored, and she's like my soul mate. And there's huge history there because my mum was adopted, so she's actually not even blood relative. So I call her, she's my
Oh, I love that.
soul
Yeah.
relative. She was so proud that her granddaughter was a nurse,
Yeah.
people, right? They love that. And my granddad. And I think I felt like I had to do that for the family because their daughter, my mum, I don't want to say this sound rude, but like didn't really make them proud. And when I was younger, my mum was an alcoholic.
Hmm.
So I felt like I had a lot of pressure on my shoulders to be perfect, to be the strong one, to be the one that could make my grandparents really proud.
Yeah, and when you're
So,
thrown into a role like that from family, and especially at that age, it's so hard to resist it. It's almost impossible, really, because you feel like you don't have an option.
yeah. Well, even so, as I said, I was from a small sort of town, and my mum, there was a town a little bit further down that did have a university, and I was in my head, like hell, I am never moving there or I will never get out of there. My dream was to move up to the Gold Coast. So I told them I'd applied to that little crappy university, but I
Yeah,
never applied because there was no way I was ever going to give myself the opportunity to be stuck there. So
yeah.
I only applied to the one university, and that was on the Gold Coast where I had always envisioned of
Oh,
moving.
I love that.
Luckily, I got in, but not on first round offer. So I was a bit like, oh my gosh, because I had this pressure. I felt this, I've got to make this move. Luckily, I got in because there was no way I was going to be stuck in that. It was never for me to be stuck in that town.
Yeah. I love that. So you still had this pull, even though you knew that maybe nursing wasn't for you. It was like you were still following your heart in a way to the
Yeah.
location.
Exactly. It was my ticket to get up there anyway. Like, so I was
Yeah.
like, hey, I'll make it work for me. And even my dad, he was like, oh, I don't know if you'll be able to, like when they were really encouraging me to just apply to the uni near home, they're like, I don't think you'll be able to move up to Gold Coast. It's so expensive. It's this, it's that. Like they had a lot of money issues. We grew up in a little house that had no internal walls. I didn't even have a proper toilet. Like we had a cami toilet. We had no money. Like I said, they were quite hippie, so they had their own, they were okay with that, but also they had their own poor money mindset.
Mm,
So I could have went two ways, and I could have been like, took on their beliefs, which I did to a degree. I'm not saying I didn't, but at the same time, when Dad said that, I was like, it gave me more of a fire, more of a passion to get myself to the Gold Coast because I'm a person that's like, I will show you what I can
yeah.
do. Yeah, so that drove me to apply to the uni to the Gold Coast to get there because again, our government back then like gave you some funding if you were in university, in school for like rent assistance and stuff like
Oh, that's
that.
cool.
Yeah, so I was like, all right, well, whatever, you want me to go to uni, this is my ticket up there, and I'm going to show and prove to you that I can up there, 17 years old, move. So yeah,
So,
that's
talking about Dharma, because I know what that means, but can you tell me, well, just give an overview of like what actually it means and how it's played out in your life? Because I feel I actually relate to a lot of what you're saying because I kind of had a midlife career change that actually set me on the course that I needed to be on. So, I'm curious to learn more about it and see how it played out in your life as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we use the word dharma, it's a Sanskrit word. Sanskrit is the language of Ayurveda. When we say dharma in the West, we often translate it straight to purpose. So dharma closely
Hmm.
relates to purpose, but there are so many different aspects of dharma. There's sad dharma, there's our dharma where you're not following your dharma. And what it does mean is it does loosely correlate to your purpose, but it's that bigger purpose in life. And it actually is the universal law for right action. So it doesn't mean your career, which a lot of us, sort of
Yeah.
translate it to, or it doesn't mean that your dharma is to be a mum and have children and just raise children. Your dharma is to show up in the right action, no matter what you're doing, whether that's
Mm,
meaningless chores at home, whether that's supporting your local community. But then when we look at the big overview of dharma and it's aligning to our dharmic path, that is how can our unique skills that come from our unique Ayurvedic constitution, our dosha, for instance, I have pitta kapha, no, sorry, pitta vata dosha. So my pitta was the fire in me that allowed me to move and be like, I'll prove it to you that I can do it, right? So what innate aspects of you do you bring into service to help humanity, to help the
Okay.
world? And so whilst I say nursing was definitely not my big dharma, like it's not my overall dharma that I had to do, it was part of my dharmic path because it gave me so much knowledge. I met my husband whilst I was
Mm-hmm.
on that journey, and I
Oh,
wouldn't have
okay.
been in hospital, which I've got beautiful children from. And so on. And some of my best mates are still all of the nurses I work with in the emergency department. So
Okay.
it was part of my path to meet these people and to acquire a certain amount of knowledge, but I always knew I was never meant to stay there because it was just a part of my path. My bigger dharma was to work in an aspect of health and wellness that was so much more holistic and that I felt really I could show up as my best self as because as a nurse, I did not I when I realized I really needed to leave was when I knew I was not capable of showing up as my higher self and being the best version of me. So I was like in the emergency department on triage a lot of the time. You're under a lot of pressure, a lot of stress, and
Yeah.
people are coming in and you harden yourself. I'm such an empath, and a lot of that empathy was sucked out of me, that
Oh,
compassion.
yeah.
And I was not me. And I would be like, right, what are you here for? And they would say what they're here for. And to them, it might be a huge thing. And in my head, I'm thinking, oh my God, do you not realize we've got friggin' people like having nurses jumping on their chest right now
Yeah, because you see a lot of stuff in the emergency
yeah.
room.
And you're coming in because you cut your finger. Like, man up. Like, these are the thoughts going in my head
Yeah.
when that could have been traumatic for them, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And even like some mental health things were coming through the door, like, and I would just be rolling my eyes at him, going, "Oh, come on!" And that's not me. And
Mm-hmm.
so I was like, "Ah, I caught myself. I got to get out of here. Like, this isn't my. I'm not showing up as my best self, even though this is meant to be a caring profession. It's not. It's sucking like the life out of me, and I'm not being who I need to be. And I love helping and supporting people, but I knew that this wasn't my dharmic path. It had expired. And so when I started realizing that, I had to, sit with myself, ask a lot of deep, hard questions, and I had to change the trajectory of my career path. And that was hard because, like I said, from 17, I'd been in nursing school. I graduated by the time I was 20. And so my whole adult life, being a nurse and making my grandparents proud and my parents and all that, that was an identity that I carried.
Yes.
And it's so hard to lose that identity because that's what you're known for
Mm-hmm.
and what people respect you for. And then you're like, well, who am I without this identity? Like, who am I? And I think in a Western society where we are celebrated for our educational standard as well,
Mm-hmm.
it was like going from an educated degree to what? Like, where do I go from here? And so when I really looked into Ayurvedic psychology aspect, like we have these 7 layers of consciousness, and I realized I had numbed myself by not aligning with my dharma, my purpose, because that is such a huge aspect of health that other health practitioners in the West don't speak of. And by
Yeah.
doing I clouded the higher aspects of my consciousness and I was acting from ahamkara, which is the ego self. And as a human in today's society, we need ahamkara, we need a certain amount of ego, but we can't create all of our decisions from that, or that'll keep us stuck in just being the smaller aspect of self. We need to be able to access our buddhi mind, which is our higher intellect. And how can you do that if that's clouded by ahamkara? And by not aligning with your dharma. So I had to really ask those questions. I had to see that for myself. And it was only through that process of applying the knowledge of Ayurvedic psychology that I was able to get myself unstuck because as I mentioned, my parents had poor money mindset issues. Like, you got to get a career, you got to you got to have a government job, or you'll be poor,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
And they were samskaras, which are samskaras, a Sanskrit word meaning imprints left on our chitta mind, which is our subconscious mind. And so every time I thought about breaking out of that mold, those samskaras would play on loop, and then it would create a fear. And that fear-based decision was then created from my ahamkara. So I
Yeah.
had to rewire those samskaras, understand those patterns are not mine to carry forward, and how can I actually access my buddhi mind and be in alignment with that to rewire those samskaras. So it was a huge process, and I've hope I've answered your question. I think I've
No,
spoken
yeah.
a
And also, like to your point, belief reprogramming, it's not easy, but it
little.
is so worth it because yeah, even I just like recently went through some residual money mindset beliefs, and it's insane when you really step back because it's like, yeah, I just basically inherited my parents' beliefs and didn't even question it until now. So it's crazy how deep rooted they become, and then we just take it as a fact.
Oh yeah. And when I did start making money for myself, living my Dharma and in alignment with everything, I felt so guilty.
Oh,
I felt
really?
so freaking guilty. And, when me and my husband bought our first house, a nice house. It was in a nice suburb and everything. And as I mentioned, growing up, we didn't even have a house with internal walls. We had to create cupboard walls out of cupboards and whatnot.
Yeah.
And at this time, my mum was still an alcoholic, which they play into that victim mentality. So the first thing she did when she walked in, and she goes, "Oh, you're doing something wrong when your daughter's got a better house than you." And so all my joy
Mm,
of buying that first house and my hard-earned money, I felt extreme guilt. And then
yeah.
I was like back into that mindset of, people that have things are selfish or ungrateful, or like we've got to share it, like give it away straight away as soon as we accumulate, give it away. And so,
Yeah.
one of the first things I did was just get her a key cut so she could access the house anytime she wanted. And
Oh, really?
yeah, yeah, so I've worked very, very, very hard on my mindset, and it still comes up, like those
Oh, for
samskaras,
sure. But
you know?
also I've noticed like you have really great self-awareness. Even I mean, even your description of working in the emergency department, because I've been in hospitals and I've been on the receiving end of that just very like uncompassionate treatment at a hospital. So it was actually kind of refreshing to hear your point of view because it's like, yeah, especially if you're an empath, you have to kind of turn that off. But it's unfortunate because some people, they probably just turn off the switch and don't have that level of self-awareness that you do, whereas you had that level of self-awareness to realize like it's so disconnected and I don't like this.
Yeah, yeah, it was, and that's the thing. Like, you kind of, and I'll just speak from my experience in the emergency department. Is the only way to shield myself as an empath was creating this persona almost as I
Yeah.
went in. And the way that I had to deal with resusces, so resuscitating people in trauma, is I had to see it purely from I'm a human mechanic. You had to
Mm.
dissociate
I
yourself
was just gonna say, I think
from
that's a form of dissociation, right? Yeah.
it. 100%. It was definitely is a form of dissociation, because if I didn't, being an empath, it would cripple me in that moment,
Oh, for sure.
and I wouldn't be able to do the work I had to do. The problem is that after that, you were too busy. You had to go on to the next emergency to then have any debriefing or any counseling or anything like that. And you just expected, especially back, this 20 odd years ago, like especially
Yeah.
in those, that's your job. So you just got to get on with it. But I can still vividly remember the faces, the body, the clothes that the people were wearing that I have resuscitated. And so I
Really?
know that I didn't deal with it because that is still imprinted in my mind. And
Yeah.
even in my book, I speak of like one guy that I resuscitated who was in his 40s, and to this day I can vision him, his picture of him, and I know it sounds sinister, but it's the only time I met him was on the resource table. I hadn't
Yeah.
met him. I can picture his everlast singlet he wore, his cargo shorts he wore to this day. The little boy that came in and apparently, sorry, unfortunately passed, and his mum, the sound of her wailing his name, like they're
Ooh.
still in me. And I think to protect myself from that, I had to put this hardened exterior
Oh,
up.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's
And then you,
so deep. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And also, I feel like, because again, you at least had the self-awareness to like understand what was happening. But for some nurses, that probably just becomes part of their identity. Like if they have to
absolutely.
dissociate to the human mechanic, like that just becomes who they are.
It does. It does. Absolutely. It almost becomes their personality.
Yeah. So I think that's probably what happens, I'm assuming.
Yeah, 100%. And, I can only speak, I mean, there's all many beautiful nurses that don't have to do that and don't do that
Right.
and work in other areas like palliative care and medical wards and stuff. And they're all kind of different breeds of nurses, really. So I'm only really can speak for myself and the direct nurses that I've witnessed do this masking as well. So if you're a nurse listening, it
Yeah,
might not be you.
this
I'm
is no
sorry.
shade to nurses. And
No.
if anything, I was just trying to be compassionate towards them because again, I've been on the receiving end of that kind of treatment, but I have never really heard it described this way. So if anything, it made me more compassionate toward nurses and why they may be acting that way if they do.
Yeah, and again, just as an example, so a trigger warning, because I'll talk about miscarriage. Is that
Hmm.
okay?
Yeah, that's okay.
So I was at triage one time, and I was struggling at that time with my own fertility,
Hmm.
and I had a lady come up, and she was miscarrying her baby. There, at that stage of miscarrying, there was nothing detrimental to her health, as in she wasn't losing a lot of blood.
Okay.
She wasn't unwell, but she was also at the stage that there was nothing that she was in an early miscarriage. Like there was nothing that could be done. It wasn't late, it was an early miscarriage.
Okay.
And we were literally bedlocked. We had absolutely no beds. And so in the triage, I said, I'll put her in a private area, but it was in a chair. So it wasn't like a bed, it was like this chair. And it was
Yeah.
the best that I could do. And I'm like, I'm so sorry to hear that. She was with her mum, and I put her in this private area so she could miscarry. Told her where the bathrooms were as well. Because
Mm,
anyway, it was horrible. But so that happens, and then the lineup keeps coming, next person, next person, next person. And when they're triaged, all of the medical team, they can see what's on the screen. And, when the doctor's free, they go and grab their patient and whatnot when there's a bed available in the department. No beds came available for a very, very long time. And so the mum came up and absolutely screamed at me and was like, my daughter is going through this. Like, how dare you? You've just put her in a chair. Like, it's nothing. No one's even come to see her yet. Like, she was, and I can see why, like she was so upset, but literally there was, it sounds awful, but there was no other way. We'd made it as private as we could for her in
yeah.
that place. But also that same day, I just got my period and I wasn't losing a baby. Like I'm not saying it was
Yeah.
anything like that. I was going through these fertility struggles. And what they, obviously this lady who was going through this miscarriage and the mum who was traumatized for her daughter, they were going through a much bigger trauma than I was.
Yeah.
But that also what they didn't know was that mum was probably the 10th person who had come and abused me that day. It
Yeah.
was also the day that I found out that, okay, my pregnancy dreams were also not a reality. And also was the day that I walked out of a shift and told my boss I'm not doing this and walked out and first, and I'm such, like I said, a type
Oh,
A,
it
very
was
good
that
worker.
day.
Yeah. And I, at the end, she broke me, but I would never let her see that. And because I'm there to be a professional. And that lady yelling at me absolutely broke me. And I walked out of that shift. Someone had to come and take her. It was horrible. And that was one of the days that I realized I
But she
can't do
actually
this.
did you a favor though.
Well, yes, I've never looked at it like that. She
Oh,
absolutely did. But, I'm just saying, even like if I might have been poker face to her and saying, I'm sorry, there's actually nothing. I also left. I changed, I was at home in tears all day. Like after that, so
Yeah.
yeah, I think we never know anyone's story.
Yeah.
And it's really challenging for all people who are sort of, yeah, going through
That,
any sort of traumas. We can't compare our traumas to anyone else's because they're relevant to us.
that's also correct. I know because when I was young, anytime I would express something, my mom's response would be like, well, someone else has it worse. But it's like the truth is we're all going through something different, so you can't even compare.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have a question. Do you think that your stress in that job was causing your fertility issues?
Yes, of course. Yes, of course. Because like I said, like the only hormone that was really imbalanced was my cortisol, which then did lead to my poor ovulation, and obviously need a good
Mm,
ovulation for pregnancy,
yeah.
and poor ovulation leads to lower progesterone. So it definitely impacted. When I actually got pregnant, my doctor was so surprised because he actually said, look, this goes to show you that not all science is accurate because you did not have the hormones to support that you should get pregnant this cycle. Like that's what he said. And then when I went back and we did the scan, we saw it was twins. He's like, oh my gosh, I can't even explain this. Like it was just great. But
But I
definitely
almost feel
stress.
like that's like a testament to how you had twins. Maybe there's another reason, but it's just like you were like suppressed for so long and then you were free. And so now you have two babies.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was yeah, crazy. I mean, after I walked out of that shift, I did end up going back. So I did go back because, again, I didn't know. But that was the start of when I was searching for answers and searching. So that happened before I even had the boys. So that
Okay.
was when I really started searching, what do I really want? And then I had, like, just to put it into a timeline perspective, then I fell pregnant actually shortly after. And at that time, straight away after leaving that shift, I was looking for all these different jobs. Then I fell pregnant, and then I also applied to be a teacher at uni. I was going to change careers completely. I got in. Then I found out I was pregnant with twins, so I deferred that and decided to stay in my job because we get maternity leave in the
Yeah.
government job. It was maternity leave. So I was like, okay, I just have to like do this until I
Yeah.
have my maternity leave. But then when that happened, I end up returning because that was the job I had to return to.
Yeah.
But whole process over that whole year, I was knowing that this was no longer my path and I was looking for where I wanted to go.
That makes sense because I think it really the when you make that decision is the turning point. So even though you like still had to carry on your path for a little bit, you had already decided in your mind.
Exactly. And that made it easier, to be honest. And then I was like, well, then I understand the level of consciousness of the mind. Like, how can I reframe this instead of going into work saying, oh my gosh, like I hate this job. I don't want to do this. I was like, I'm so grateful that I have a government job that's funding me the
Mm,
means to be able to search for my purpose. Like
yeah.
every time I was driving to work, I was having to reframe my gratitude for the job that I was in. And the job became easier when I did reframe it in my
Yeah.
mind, to be honest, but I still knew it was becoming easier. It wasn't meant for me.
So
Yeah.
where does the fitness instructor, because you were a trainer and you did teach fitness classes, so where does that fit into all of this? Oh, and the activewear. I want to hear all about that.
Yeah, well, I did always do fitness training on the side, yoga, Pilates. Um, and that was the other thing with nursing, it was really hard to get set shifts. So it was
Mm,
really hard to have set classes. So it was kind of almost challenging to have a career and also health coaching, because I was doing that on the side because you didn't get set shifts.
yeah.
And so that's when I knew something had to shift as well. So the activewear, I was like, okay. I really want to inspire women to live, a healthy, happy, active life. Like I said, I was over the sick care. I wanted to really work in healthcare. So I don't know why they call like nurses and doctors working in healthcare because they're in sick care. And then I was like, if I do an activewear label, I felt like I had so much to say, but I wasn't confident enough to come out online and say it from my own personal brand. So I felt like the way I could do it was hide behind a label. And
Mm.
yeah, so I was like, okay. And back then, like, Instagram was newish, and I was always like, social media, like, I don't want to go on social media. Like, that's so
Yeah.
weird. Who does that? And, had all these limiting beliefs again. And I was like, well, if it's not me, if it's an activewear label, people might be fooled by like being attached to a label rather than a person, which is me, which, as we know, branding, it doesn't even work like that so much. But I felt I could hide behind a label. So I did that. And it was called Harmony Inspired Activewear because I always just wanted to inspire people.
Yeah.
And did that for quite some time. And then I realized it's actually my voice that I want people to hear, not leggings, not a crop top to run in.
Yeah.
Like, and and health is so much, I mean, movement is medicine. I always say that, but it's so much more than that as well.
Yeah.
Um, so I did have the activewear label alongside my Ayurvedic consulting business for a while, and then in COVID we shut that down because I
Okay.
ended up having a business partner who was going through her own stuff, and it was just the right time to let it go. Yeah.
Okay. Was that an identity shift as well, or were you ready to let it go at that point?
I was ready to let it go. And I think it really, again, like I talk about Dharmic path, to me, it wasn't wasteful at all because it helped me with so many connections that I have now in my health and wellness
Okay.
business. And it sort of set me up for the success in this business, really, as well.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I love
Yeah.
how you piece together your story very intentionally that it demonstrates your path.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So
when someone comes to work with you, what does that look like? Like what kind of things do you work with them on?
yeah, so I still do see one-to-one clients in clinic and all over the world. And if they're just coming in for a consultation and follow-up, they're usually coming in for hormonal imbalances, stress, anxiety, and gut health. Like they're the main things that I work with. Surprise, surprise, being through it myself. So I specialize in women's health. And we'll have an initial consultation. We'll work out their individual constitution, so from an Ayurvedic lens. And then they are prescribed a protocol that is completely created for that individual, depending on their constitution. And that will look like some lifestyle shifts. It might look dietary changes for their constitution, herbal medicine, depending on what they've come in for, what their constitution is, maybe even breathwork techniques. And then we will have a follow up to see how, and weight loss is another big thing that a lot of people come to me for, to see how that supported them. And then we can make any changes or tweaks in their Ayurvedic protocol at the follow up if needed. A lot of
Okay.
people already get the results. I also treat women's health issues through acupuncture if they're local to the Gold Coast. And the main sort of business that most of my time goes into at the moment is the Ayurveda Alchemist Academy. So we actually train other women to become Ayurveda holistic health consultants. And then we've
Okay.
also got a level two, which is an Ayurvedic practitioner level. We have a Vedic breathwork certification, which we're actually running in Bali in 2026, and a bodyworks, like a therapist certification.
Nice.
Yeah.
And is the Dharma part of any of that, or is that something separate that you offer?
No, yeah, Dharma is also all of my offerings are founded on my higher self method, which is what my book is also based on.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you about next. So yes, tell us about
Yeah,
your book.
yeah. So I'll tell you the higher self method, what I saw, whether it was students in my academy or women in my clinic, they may want to come in and sort their hormonal issues out. Students may want to, add to their careers. But at the end of the day, all of the women were searching for is to really step into their truth and their higher self.
Mm,
And like I said, when I wasn't addressing all aspects of my health, which includes Dharma, purpose, emotional, mental, um, physical, and spiritual health, I wasn't fully able to step into my higher self. So even as that nurse who was masking, I was quite like, at times very healthy and fit because I was a boot camp instructor. I was running and I was
yeah,
eating, all the foods, but I wasn't mentally fit, was I?
yeah,
And I wasn't spiritually connected. And so I wasn't able to show up as my higher self, even though on the outside I looked fit and toned and whatever. And so what I realized was what we're all trying to do is get to that higher self version. And our physical health has a lot to do with it, but so do all the other aspects.
hmm
And so I looked at these three pillars of what has supported myself and my clients to get to that level. Like the clients that get there, what had they
yeah,
done? And we looked at the first pillar, health alchemy. They had to address, yes, their physical health, but also the emotional, mental, and spiritual. And then we had to look at the second pillar, the empowered mind paradigm. You can't heal from a disempowered state. You can't shift your career or your perception of self from a disempowered state. You have to step into an empowered state of mind. And the way we do that through Ayurvedic psychology, accessing those higher levels of consciousness that we are not accessing. And
yeah.
if we're just living in the ahamkara. And then the third pillar, which I saw so much in my clinic, which just blew me away when I was putting all this together, was that we could get them on the diet and the protocols and the supplements and, do a few mindset shifts. But if they didn't feel like they had any purpose in their life, if they didn't feel like they were showing up with intention and the right action to any task they were doing, they didn't feel whole and complete. And so we had to look at the Dharma piece because there were some women, yes, it may be they felt like they weren't in the career that they wanted. Some women had their kids had moved on and they felt like, who am I now without my kids? There were some
hmm
women who felt like every time that they were happy enough with their job, they weren't career focused, but when they went to work, they felt really like they had no energy because they were bored. And
Yeah.
so the lack of energy was coming from lack of purpose and dharma, not so much lack of nutrition and lack of supplementation and whatnot, because they were fine on the weekends. They were fine
Yeah.
when they left.
I used to live my life like that. And I thought like I was like, this is just how life is. I didn't realize that there was something different available. So I love that you're calling that out. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what I was like, most health practitioners aren't looking at that aspect. And I think for everyone, like every human, it's important, but for women, and we go through so many transitions in our life as women,
hmm
very cyclical. I mean, monthly cyclical, daily we're cyclical, but also
Yeah.
we have a cyclical transitions in our life. And so when I put that higher self method together, I applied that into my clinic and we teach it in the academy. And so it governs like our programs as well. And then I wrote a whole book which included my story. Because like I said, I had alcoholic mum, there's lots of
Yeah.
adoption, like so much identity pieces, how I applied this higher self method to my life, my clients' lives, and how you can apply it to your own life. And so that's why I wrote my book, Ayurveda and the Alchemy of Her, and put it out there in the world. It was like all of my life work
Yeah.
put together in a few words. Not a few, it's 400
Yeah.
and something pages.
No, I love
Yeah.
that because I think those are the conversations we need to be having more because there probably are women who are like how we used to be, and then you don't know what's next. But if you have a guide to guide you through that, then that's so helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. And I especially found it for women sort of between that 35 to 55, like sort of perimenopause to menopause transitional phase of life, that they start to question a lot of their
Oh, really?
choices in life. And also it is a time we say in Ayurveda, like you're stepping into that wise womanhood. And so we do have access, we can easily access those higher levels of consciousness if we allow ourselves to.
I love that, the wise woman era.
Yeah. And I think that's why there's so many like career shifts midlife for
That
women.
does make sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
if someone wants to work with you or buy your book or anything, how can they get a hold of you? And you work with all over the world, right? Because you said you had US clients.
Yeah, work all over the world. My website, harmonyinspiredhealth.com.au, has got all of my offerings there. The academy is ayurvedaalchemist.com.au. And I hang out on Instagram if you're a social media person, Harmony Inspired Ayurveda. So if you do have any questions, jump into my inbox in on Instagram and ask me there. And I also offer a lot of free resources on my podcast, Harmony Inspired Health.
Nice. Well, thank you so much for being on. I think I want to, yeah, follow you and look into this more because this is the most I've ever learned on this topic, and I think it's really fascinating, and I think it's really important. So, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your knowledge.
Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate all the work you do as well.
Oh, thank you.